like they would think your name was strange. They would say, "Oh, how come you act differently?" And so it became a bit of a test. It became a test because as a kid growing up in such a situation where everyone else is different from you, and I'm sure we can all relate to this, whether it's at university, if it's at your workplace, what have you, or just the general environment that we live in. Sometimes you feel you sense peer pressure, but in reality it's not really someone pressuring you, but you have this sense or this sentiment that someone is disapproving of what you would normally do if you were to practice your religion. And so as a child, it becomes very, very difficult to try to say, "Oh, I am Muslim and I have to pray Dhuhr, so peace out, I'm going to go pray my Dhuhr while you guys are play at recess." All of these things, and then try to explain, why are you fasting? I remember it was a question in innocence, but it was understanding in ignorance, where someone would ask, "Oh, you're fasting, so how long do you fast for?" And I would say, "Oh, we fast for this is the month of Ramadan, so we fast for the month." They go, "You fast the entire month? Like, how do you survive?" Because they're thinking, "Oh, you don't eat for 30 days, literally." It's like, no, from like sunrise to sunset. And so then kids would be kids, like, "Oh, the school systems, they were ill-equipped for handling this, so you would just go to the cafeteria during lunchtime and just sit there while everyone else is eating, and they're asking, why aren't you eating?" And so all of these things. And the reality is that this is difficult. I mean, for someone to say that, "Oh, you just have to follow the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and completely ignore the peer pressure and the questioning and the antagonizations that kids might have," because kids are kids, right? It's difficult. And so we have to first acknowledge that. And so the thing is that there are many people who, when they are put in that situation, they feel they have to conceal who they are. And so this is the type of environment that at least for myself, that I grew up in. And so my parents, they were very, very devout in instilling Islamic values. So every day, because we lived farther from masjid, every day my father would do the nazarah himself with me and my sister, and then he would make sure that he'd go through aqidah with us every day, just to make sure that everything was on the level. Now, elementary school is one of those situations where you don't see, especially if you're in an environment like, for example, in the United States, there's various cross sections, right? We have societies which are more urban, we have societies that are very rural, we have societies that are very liberal, we have societies that are very conservative. And so where one chooses to live has a deep impact on the influences that they will experience. And so in my case, moving to a suburb or a village that was basically very, very conservative, you found people were not necessarily immoral, like from like a high level. Like, it's taking deen aside, taking religion out of it, the average person, they would still be respectful, they wouldn't act up, they wouldn't have ill language, they wouldn't do illicit actions. And so that environment, you didn't feel as if you'd have to act, you were acting differently from everyone else, other than the fact that your ibadat and your worship was different. And so fast forward though, as you get older, elementary school, middle school, kids are kids, the innocence starts to fade. And so you enter high school, and I mean, I engaged in sports, I played football, ran track, I was all my friends were my teammates. And so we say friends, right? Because you didn't have anything else to look towards, because the community, the environment was such that you had to make friends with those people that were around you. Otherwise you would be isolated and alone. And so my father then, as I got older, he would say, like, beta, you call these people your friends, and it's fine if you want to, associate and you want to engage, but the reality is like there's going to come a time there's going to come an age, there's going to come a period of time as you get older where you're going to find there's going to be a lot more incompatibility. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, Daddy, yeah, okay, no big deal. But then college came, and I went to university, and I left home, so I went out of state I went to Michigan. And so there, I lived in the dorms. And it was very eye-opening. There's things you see that you can't unsee, unfortunately. Because there's no supervision, there's no sense of a parent or an elder, someone that's guiding all of these youth. And so people just do wherever the wind blows, that's the way they go. And so then I realized my father's point, that there is a point where you understand that you live in a society, you have to engage with people in a society, but then you have to also realize you have your own identity. And your identity is that which is to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because how can you worship the Khaliq if you don't understand who the Khaliq is? And so then at that point I started to ponder and reflect that, in order to achieve that, I need to learn more about this religion, learn more about this deen. So it was in my older years that I decided to learn about the deen. And so in college it was more like, back then there was various, I'm not going to do a name drop, but there was certain organizations that would do various classes, and they would travel, the scholars would travel to their various college campuses. And so I would participate in those. But then after I graduated college and I got my first job, I studied engineering. And so on the side I actually studied biochemistry, but because my parents were like, my parents were of the type that their question is not what do you want to be when you grow up. Their question was, what type of doctor do you want to be? And so, but then as I was in college, I started thinking and realizing that, I don't know if I really want to pursue medicine. I'd rather start a family at a younger age, and then, focus on, having a good family and all that at a younger age rather than, being in my 30s before I get started. So after a conversation that was full of disappointment, but my parents, they agreed, and so I became an engineer. So and to this day, my father, by the way, he says like, "Oh, what could have been? What could have been?" But anyways, so I moved to upstate New York where I got my first job, and alhamdulillah, there was a Muslim community there, and so I was participated by just going to the masjid, and I would go to work, and at my job, I was the only Muslim at my job, and so that's where the test began. Because I remember I started my first day of work on a Monday, and then that very Monday, as I was going through the paperwork and filling out my W-4s and all that, I started thinking like, Friday's coming. Like, what am I going to say on Friday? And then Tuesday came around, and I was like, what am I going to do? Friday's coming. And then Wednesday, and then Thursday, and then finally Friday came. And I'm like, subhanAllah. So I go to my manager and say, look, I need to take my lunch. I need to take an extended lunch on Friday so I can go to Friday prayer, and I'll just come back and stay a little later to make up the time. And he's like, oh, yeah, no problem. And he's like, go right ahead, take all the time you need. And I was like, huh? Like, everyone seems to think that, you can't tell people that you want to practice your deen. If it's Christianity, sure. If it's Judaism, sure, because they have Saturday and Sunday, right? But if it's Islam, you'll feel that, I don't want to impose, I don't want to inconvenience everybody. But then I was like, this is great. And so then I went to Jummah, I came back, I finished my day, I come back on Monday, and I used to just pray Salah at Fajr at the masjid, then I would just go to work. So then I'd have to make Dhuhr at work. So I would just go into an empty conference room that was unused, and I would just pray in there. And then eventually people came to know that I did this. And so sometimes maybe someone might just walk in, and they're like, oh, okay, he's praying, so we'll just come back later. So one of my manager, he calls me in the office, like, why don't you take this room here? We'll just give it this room view to where you're praying. So they gave me musalla. And I'm bringing this up is because this is a very, very common issue that many of us will face growing up in Western society, is that we feel as though we feel ashamed to practice our faith in the full view of the society we live in. And the reality is there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. And so you see that when you interact with people with confidence, when you interact with people with a sense of identity, a sense of self-worth, especially when it comes to one's faith, people respect that. And when they respect it, then they know that this person is not going to will be unwavering in their conviction about their faith. And so then they will entertain and they will facilitate whatever you need in order to accomplish that. Because they see that, oh, this person has a lot of dedication, conviction, and zeal towards this type of practice. Whether they agree with it or not, that's irrelevant. And so in this society that we live in, it's very different, because when you go to other countries, and I saw this a lot with a lot of grad students that would come to university, or people who would come to the United States and work side by side with me in my particular jobs, is that if they came from a Muslim country, the whole country would stop and say, okay, the adhan is going on, and people would just go and walk and pray in the musalla, pray in the masjid. There would be masjids on every street corner, so people would just go and they would go pray. But it's only then, when they come to a country that doesn't have that type of convenience, that type of blessing, that they feel truly tested. Because now, before they were praying because it was just everyone was doing that. But when you come here, you're praying because you want to pray. You're worshiping Allah because you want to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's a choice that you're making. And remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has chosen where each and every one of us would be born, and where each of us would settle and which would die. It's mentioned in narrations that the tailbone, the coccyx, the bone, it contains some soil. And that soil, it's indicative of where you will be when you die. So, meaning that we say soil, but nowadays science will say, oh, it's your carbon footprint, you could say. And so, we are here because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen us to be here. And by choosing us for us to be here, that means there's something worked for us to be doing here. Now, whether that is simply, no one is saying that everyone has to aspire to go out and, preach the deen to each and every person. But you can do that, and each and every one of us can do it in their own way. And how can they do that? By leading by example. Your daʿwah doesn't have to be like, oh, why aren't you Muslim, or be Muslim? But it could just be like your character, the way you carry yourself, the way you conduct your interactions with people. They see that and they realize there's something special, there's something different about this person. It reminds me when one of the first delegations that the Prophet ﷺ sent to Medina, it was a delegation led by Mus'ab ibn Umair radhiyallahu anhu. And he was just a small boy. And he goes to Medina, and he goes there and he begins to talk about Islam, and he begins to conduct himself with respect and kindness. And people were thinking, they weren't thinking about what he was saying, they were thinking about how he carried himself. They were like, subhanAllah, this small boy, in some narrations 9, and others 12, because they know kids are kids. They run around, they play, they don't sit still, they're constantly talking and interrupting. And this child, this young Musab, he's just conducting himself with such confidence, conducting himself with such self-respect and such khair towards everyone else, doing ihsan upon everyone around him, that they said there's something special about this boy. So what is it that made him special? And they just they connected the dots, and they realized it's the religion he's preaching. It's this deen of Islam that he's preaching, that this is what's making him so special. And so then it made them curious, and through that curiosity, it led to them accepting this deen. So similarly, we can be the Musab of our own time. We can go and we can conduct ourselves, we can carry ourselves, we can interact with people that maybe have different a different mindset or a different stereotype or a different viewpoint of who we are as Muslims. But when they actually engage with us and they actually deal with us, whether it's through work or just even a simple interaction of holding a door open for someone as they're walking through behind you, or the conversation you share with the cashier at the grocery store, all these small things, they add up. And so this is very different than what I was going to talk about, but I just felt that, it's very important because, oftentimes we feel shy to be Muslim, but in reality, the people around us that are not Muslim, they're shy to ask us about Islam. So if they're shy to ask us, then we need to put our best face forward and instill some confidence so that we can show them what this deen is, show them what Islam is. And through that, it won't just be a benefit for them, but it'll be a benefit for each and every one of us that does this. Why? Because now you won't feel shy to practice your deen. You'll feel confident walking and you're in the middle of the city and say you have to pray. You just go to the side and you pray, and not worrying that someone's going to stare or look or say anything to you. Or you're at school and you're saying, I need to be excused because I have to go pray Jummah. Or I have to go and miss class because I have to, or go leave work because I have to go to Salat al-Eid. Like all of the different things that we practice, because we live in a society that's not conducive towards, Islam itself. Rather, it's guided towards a Judeo-Christian faith, where everything is based upon, you work outside of those days of worship for them. So we have to live in this society in order to be amongst the people here. Sometimes, I'll bring this back because sometimes some people will ask this question then, well, you talked about public school earlier, and, well, the environment and all that. So, but alhamdulillah, now we live in a society that there's Islamic schools. Now a lot of people there's an uprise in homeschooling as well. And as I mentioned, we're the byproduct of the public school system. And the people sometimes will have this false understanding of the pitfalls of public school and the benefits of other schooling systems. I'm not meaning to criticize anything, but the school you go to, it's temporary. You go to school for 6 to 8 hours a day. But the other 16 to 18 hours, you're not in school, you're at home. The home environment is going to be far more influential on how a child grows, how an individual becomes more rooted in their identity as a Muslim than it would be in the Islamic school. Because the child will think, okay, the school has rules, just like any school has rules. But then I see do my parents follow those same rules? Do my siblings follow those same rules? Does my family engage in those same rules? And if the answer is no, then the child is never truly going to respect what they learn in the school either. And likewise, sometimes the cross-section of where you live, like you live in say you live in a certain city or you live in a certain environment, and you take a cross-section across the entire population, like there's going to be good and bad. That same cross-section you're going to find in any school you go to. And so children might pick up bad habits in one place, but they might pick up those same bad habits in another environment as well. What it comes down to is instilling those values in the home. And when that happens, then a child will then respect what they learn because they see their parents doing that. And so I will tell you this about myself, that the very first day I started studying the deen more seriously was when my son was born, my oldest son. So when he was born, that's when I started taking formal classes. And then it was part-time. And then a couple years later, my daughter was born. And when my daughter was born, I increased in my study. And then when my third child was born, my second son was born, I increased even more. And then when my fourth child was born, I became full-time. I did the exact opposite. Because Shaitan is saying, oh, you don't have time. You have children, you have family, take care of them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sees the effort, He sees the hard work that someone does, and He makes it easy. He makes it easy. And He made it easy for me as well because alhamdulillah, He blessed me with a spouse who supported me throughout the entire course. Allah SWT supported me by making my work incredibly easy while I was studying full time. Like, it was to the point where everything would just became just like it was akin to like taking the trash out. That's how quickly work would get done. And so we tend to allow shaitan to seep into our mind and make us think that we can't achieve things because of all this other dunya around us. But the reality is that the dunya is something that we're here to live in the dunya, but the purpose of the dunya is really to prepare for our akhirah. Like, how many people here studied calculus? Okay, so if I were to take a ratio of the life on earth to the akhirah, let's be generous. Say you live 100 years, right? May Allah give us life that long. But how long? What number would you use to represent akhirah? Infinity, right? So I have this ratio, say 100 over infinity. So a fixed number over infinity. Now let's just make this a function. So let's say 100 over x. Now what's the limit as x approaches infinity? Yeah. MashaAllah, right? But it's not 0. It approaches 0, right? What does that tell you? It tells you still live in the dunya, you do some work for the dunya, you do what you need to live in the dunya, but you prepare more for the akhirah. Because that's what's important, because that's infinity. I've talked a bit long, so let me let Maulana Adil speak a bit, inshallah. But, but I'll just close with this, inshallah, before I let Maulana Adil speak. And it's just that the takeaway I want to tell you about this is that we're just regular people too. And we have regular experiences. We had the same fitan, we had the same trials, we had the same tests as everybody else. It's a matter of how you change the way you think and how you approach things and how you perceive things. And then through that change, then you're able to navigate towards your goals, navigate towards your aspirations, and ideally make those in alignment with how you can please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have a question? Yes.
So, a common conversation that I have with some sisters, it doesn't necessarily have to be specifically with hijab, it could be just other acts that we were told to do, is that when sisters move from Muslim majority countries and come to America, there's almost like, it's not more of a shame, it's more like fear in practicing of just like, especially with everything that's going on. It's more, how would you advise someone who's struggling with doing their practices because of that fear that they may have doing?
So the question it was directed towards people who come to the United States, but it probably could be applicable to anyone really. Is that in this day and age?
I feel like with us, like who are born and raised,
Right.
it's less fearful.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with you.
I'm less scared.
So it touches on something I mentioned earlier. So the question is like when someone comes from, let's just say like someone comes from an environment where they're not tested, meaning that it's very conducive to people practicing. So for example, an immigrant comes from a Muslim country, or someone who's just been in an environment that's very, very conducive to Islam. And so then they come to the United States, or they leave that environment, come to an environment that now they suddenly start to feel that there's a sense of fear, or a sense of anxiety, a sense of trepidation, because they feel that this ever watchful eye, or something might happen to them, something bad might happen to them. And it's interesting. It's interesting because, living here, and this is why, especially for the youth, this is very important. I think, Milana, we talked about this a couple of days back, is that, being tested is the best way to develop conviction. And so when you are faced with adversity, then and you're able to get past it, then you look back and say, oh, alhamdulillah, I did that, or alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed me to do that. And so then you feel you're more equipped and you're more well suited to dealing with that issue again in the future. Whereas someone who has never experienced that, when they come, now suddenly they feel that, oh, now before everyone was doing what I was doing, or no one really was coming down on me for doing what I was doing because it was acceptable, society accepted it. But here now I feel that society doesn't accept it. When you look at the news, you look at what people say, if you read too much, you read too many like blogs, and too many Quoras or too many Reddits or too many social media posts, and suddenly you start to feel bogged down with this idea that everyone is out to get you, and so now you feel afraid to be who you are. And this is a human emotion, but this is also the work of Shaitan. He's trying to make you feel scared in order to not practice. And so the best remedy for that is to baby steps. If you feel afraid, then you start by, okay, I'm gonna go. I'll pray, and I'll pray somewhere that's quiet, or I will. I'll try to avoid environments or situations where I feel that there is some type of trigger for my anxiety or my fear. But then you take baby steps. You start putting yourself out into, take yourself out of that comfort zone, and you move slowly into that area where you feel that you might be afraid, and you build a tolerance. This is actually what psychologists actually do this when people have phobias. Like, what do they say when someone has a fear of heights? They say, okay, why don't you like stand on a stool? And then after you feel okay, after some time, then stand on a chair. Then after some time, it's like, oh, why don't you go up a couple of rungs on that ladder over there? And slowly, they build this tolerance, and then they realize, what was I ever afraid of? And so, similarly, when it comes to practicing in the West or in the non-Muslim environment, then you have to, like, I remember as a kid, when I had to pray, I was in sports, so I would just go to the locker room and pray in the locker room, like the sweat-smelled locker room, right? And so, like, because, football players, laundry is alien to them, by the way, and, like, the pads and stuff, you played too, so you know. And so it's just, but the thing was, I didn't want to just go in the middle of the hallway or in the middle, like, stand up. I'm not going to stand up literally in the middle of like English literature and be like, Allahu Akbar, and start praying. And they're going to be like, what is this? Is this poetry? What is this? I mean, that wouldn't work, right? So you would take yourself out. But as I got older, then I remember then, like, in season, I would tell my coach, like, oh, look, I have to pray. So I'm just going to excuse myself to go run back to the locker room, because like Salah would come while we were practicing. So I was like, oh, I have to go pray Maghrib. So I would just go to the locker room. But then over time, I was like, I'm just going to pray on the sideline, because you build that level of tolerance, that conviction. Then slowly, you in the class, you're like, oh, I have to go pray. They're like, okay, go ahead. I just go. Because it's loud in the class, I just go in the hallway. And so you don't have to feel like, oh, you don't. And then people could be walking back and forth in the hallway, and nobody says, oh, that's just Kashif, he's just praying. It's like, oh, it's no big deal. Like, so that nobody really thought anything of it, because now they not only were, first of all, we tend to think that they're more uncomfortable seeing us pray, but in reality, we're just making ourselves feel uncomfortable thinking they're uncomfortable. They really don't care. I mean, if you're walking down the street, the average person is thinking about in their mind what they're going to have for dinner that day, how they're going to pay their bills. They got to take their kid to soccer practice. They're thinking about life. They're not going to suddenly, everything in their mind just goes completely out the window and be like, oh, that guy over there, what is he doing? He's putting his head on the ground. What is he doing? Like, that's not typical. I mean, maybe they'll look, but then they'll just go about their way, because they're just not even going to pay any heed to it. So that's more of the reality. And it's just that fear is coming because, for those, especially for people who've never been in that environment, they never experienced it. So then they start to feel like the hairs on the back of their neck are rising, because like they're thinking that someone's gonna jump them, or someone's gonna do something. But in reality, like, these things don't really happen. And so, but again, if someone feels uncomfortable, then there's strength in numbers. Like, you want to go pray. If a sister wants to wear hijab, then she goes with her other sister, female friends who also wear hijab, and you go out together. You're in class together. You go. You navigate. The campus or your workplace or wherever it is where there's other Muslims. You do it in the confines of a group. So that way you feel more comfortable. And so I remember even like the whole thing with the pants over the ankle, right? Everybody used to make this whole thing like, oh, it's weird. Why are you doing that? But then, look at society today. a common trend is ankle pants, right? Pants that I love it because I don't have to hem anything anymore. I just go and buy the ankle pants, right? But now they actually sell those, right? And like I remember, facial hair was like an alien concept, like 20 years ago. Now there's probably more men with some type of facial hair than there are men that are clean shaven now. It's people are going back to fitra, whether they're Muslim or not. I mean, so these type of things, there's ebbs and flows, right? Sometimes you'll see where and so the thing is, we don't need to be swayed by the ebb and flow of fashion or ebb and flow of culture and society. We stick to our guns, so to speak, and we have conviction in the deen that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed for us. And so again, to your question and to the sister's question, is that you just have to build up confidence if you're not confident. You don't just jump right into the cold ocean of the water. You tread in slowly, and then you build that confidence so that you will that anxiety, that fear will slowly it will diminish, inshallah, and then it'll be completely eradicated.
Just to quote a hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Inna hadha ad-din mateen, fa'awghilu fihi birifq." Exactly what he said. That this deen is firm. It's very strong, very strong. So you have to become strong. But how are you going to get there? Exactly like he said. فَأَوْغِلُوا enter يعني أدخلوا أوغلوا فيه برفق. Enter into it slowly, gradually. نرمی کے ساتھ, gently. Yani take those baby steps that will get you to that firmness. To the point that, as he said, alhamdulillah, I came from an environment more of a survival aspect than where you just had to kind of, be a part of the environment and grow up in that good environment. We didn't have an environment. It was more of a survival for us back in 60s, 70s. Very difficult. It was a kind of a different time, and daʿwah was different a little bit back then as well. But exactly the thing that he said is, we have to take those steps for us to become better people. To the point when you start taking those gradual steps and society sees you're consistent, what happens, you grow a confidence about you that everybody can see. You don't have to actually even explain it to anyone. And you could just be in the middle of a crowd and offering prayer without any fear, any hesitation. Why? Because you have that confidence. And people know that confidence as well. It's amazing to the extent that even those people who are around you, they will remind you that it's time for prayer, or they will remind you it's time for your Jummah. That's the consistency that we need. And really, in time, this is part of the islah of the nafs, that we need to gradually lull that nafs. Yeah. Okay. You have a question?
Well, kind of feedback of what you were saying. Like me, I've been Muslim like 3 years, January the 14th, 3 years ago. And at first, like on the flip side, like not being scared, but like kind of with your intentions, like be like, oh look, they think it's cool I'm praying. Like at first, it's kind of easy to think like that, but how I quickly got over that. First of all, like the foundation, I knew Islam is like the truth. So I knew why I'm doing it. Second, like you said, nobody cares. You know what I'm saying? Like at the end of the day, nobody cares at all. So like when you're doing it with bad intentions, your prayers like not valid. Like it don't matter. Like you're just doing it. So like that's what helped me get over some of that. Like nobody cares. Because I live with, I'm the only Muslim. Like my family, like where I live anyway. Like so, that's kind of what helped me.
Yeah, mashallah. So, yeah, just to comment on that, that's the thing, is that when someone wants to practice their religion, practice the deen, they just have to remember that, shaitan wants, what does shaitan want to do? He wants to come to us from the right, from the left, from the forward, and from the back to dissuade us, to take us from the path. Why? Because he has this ill-conceived, quote-unquote, competition with Allah, that he thinks he will get more people in Jahannam than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will enter into Jannah. Right? All through it, because of his arrogance. And so, the reality is that if we remember, when we engage in any act of worship, or even just conducting ourselves as a upright Muslim, just remember that those thoughts and those feelings, like this, part of it is from shaitan, because shaitan wants us to falter. Shaitan wants us to feel afraid. Shaitan wants us to feel anxiety, make us feel uncomfortable in our skin. So that way, we will try to, nowadays, what's the term they say? They say, Muslims, we don't assimilate. They say, this is the common phrase. So then shaitan's going to use that terminology. He's like, you really want them to think that you're an outsider? Do you really want them to think that you can't assimilate? But, Islam was something that when it came to pass, it was something strange. And when it leaves, it'll be something strange. So just remember that there's nothing wrong in being considered strange in that way. In reality, it's not strange, it's the haqq, it's the truth, as the brother mentioned. And so the idea is that when you feel this sense of unease, then you just think about, what is shaitan trying to do? And shaitan's trying to make me this way, so I need to not feel this way. I remember one of my teachers, he mentioned this. It was regarding shaitan and his waswasa. Now, shaitan, he can give waswasa, but he can't read our minds. Right? He doesn't have the ability to read what's in our head. He only can observe our actions. And so he said, if you feel a bunch of waswasa while you're praying, he's like, because he said his teacher told him this, he said, just smile. Smile. Because shaitan will be watching and be like, this is Ajib. I'm poking and prodding this guy, this sister, this brother so much. I'm giving so much waswasa, I'm doing a number on them. And they're just smiling. They're enjoying it. So the thing is, what the idea is that sometimes the action, a physical action, it can break a mental block. And so by that, it doesn't have to be smiling, but this is just the example that one of my teachers mentioned. And it's just that the idea is that you're disconnecting your mind from dwelling on that waswasa. So whatever you find that works for you, then that's a good habit to engage in. Not saying we all just in our salah are just cheesing, because the imam does his salam, turns around, is like, what's everyone doing, grinning ear to ear? But did I make a mistake? Did I do something wrong? No, but I'm saying it's like, just think about the fact that shaitan is trying to, quote, mess with us, as they say, right? And so we just need to overcome that by intellectualizing and understanding that everything that we feel, it's part and parcel to the plot of shaitan, to make us falter, to make us stay and remove ourselves from the correct path. So if you feel that waswasa, usually it means you're doing something right. You know who gets the most waswasa? The shuyukh. They get more waswasa than anyone else. Why? Because there's more on their head about, this is, what are the ahkam, what's important, what's permissible, what's not. And so then shaitan tries to mess with them more, because the shayateen, what do they do at the end of the day? They go and they meet with shaitan, they say, what did I do? And they say, then they present their malfeasance that they conducted in the dunya. So if someone were to say to someone, I made this alim or this scholar or this abid or this learned person falter, that to them is a bigger victory than just having a layperson falter. And so just remember, everyone gets waswasa. And so you just have to understand and intellectualize what it is you're trying to do. And because emotional attachment to ibadah is wonderful, but what's more superior to emotional attachments to things is intellectual attachments. that we understand why we're praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We understand why we're trying to follow the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We understand why we're conducting ourselves in the way we do intellectually. Because if you intellectually understand something, then even when you feel something emotionally, you won't waver, because your intellect is telling you to overcome that emotional feeling, inshallah.
I feel that the smile also works with people, because in the grocery they are staring at me from up to down, but as soon as I smile,
Yeah, the sisters mentioned like smiling works in dawah too. It does, because you go like this with the long beard and topi, and you go into the grocery store and you're like, how much is this? Then they're like, oh, thank you. Like, oh, he smiled. Like, he's different. So it's, and honestly, I found that one of the biggest dawahs is holding a door open for a female as a man. Because the non-Muslims, they tend to think, Islam is not suitable for women. It's oppressive to women. But then they suddenly see you holding a door open, then they get really happy, because they say, oh, this is different than what I expected. This is actually a common thing. I remember like during, I was in college when 9/11 happened. But if you ever followed the stories of military personnel who came back from their time in the Middle East, they would come back and say the nicest things about people from Iraq, people from Afghanistan. Like they would say, oh, those people are so nice. It's because what you see in the media doesn't correlate to what you see in reality. And so just remember, we live in a society where people don't see that. Their entire understanding of Islam is what you present to them. So if you present it with a smile, with a kind face, and having good demeanor, then they're going to think the same. They're just going to change their perception. And when that perception changes, then it opens the door, like I said, with the story of Musab ibn Umair. It opens the door to curiosity. And through that opening of that door, then people want to learn about it. People want to learn more about it and understand, what is this Islam? Like, this is completely different from what I heard. This is what they'll be thinking. And so then when they start to learn, they realize slowly that Islam is very different than what the media portrays it to be. And then the doors of Hidayah, inshallah, will open for them as well. And we make dua that, everyone, the door of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give Hidayah to everyone and anyone, so that they can be upon this haqq, and they can enjoy the fruits of the akhirah if they are able to build this dunya towards that endeavor, inshallah.
You reminded me of one of those things that Mufti Shafi Sahib rahmatullah alayhi used to say, Maulvi के बारे में, मौलवी का शैतान वो भी मौलवी होता है. मौलाना वसीम का है. अच्छा, मौलवी का शैतान वो भी मौलवी होता है. In other words, the ulama and those people who are, like he said, who are all the time in religious issues, they're always debating and this and that they have in their mind, and they make up excuses sometimes. Oh, I'm busy, I don't have time for nafil prayers or nafil this and that, And so he would say that the Maulvi, his shaitan is a Maulvi too, because even though something is better that he should be doing that as well, but he'll make an excuse for him because he has ilm and knowledge. So he'll use that against him sometimes. And therefore, you have to be careful. It's a deception. Physical worship in itself is always better than other aspects of the deen. We have to be careful and weigh each and everything, and just be particular in that regards. May Allah tabarak wa ta'ala bless you, inshallah, all of you, for listening and having patience. Jazakallah khairan, inshallah. Or I guess we should stop because it's time.
Yeah, inshallah.
Subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.